Thank you, Jangus. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Is volume okay? All right. I saw nods. Thank you. So I am very excited to be able to talk to you guys today because, as I sort of highlighted front and center, our goal, of course, as genetic counselors and really as everybody in this room, is to help our patients. And so we are relying on our technology, the excellence of our lab, and then using that along with our skill set as genetic counselors to really take great care of our patients and your patients. So to that end, we're just going to touch a little bit from the patient care side on haploidy and triploidy, that contamination that Jangus had mentioned, PGTM, talk briefly about difficult cases, and just the psychological impact as well, because I don't know that that always gets the attention that it deserves. So just to highlight the SNP NGS difference, this is a small but not an insignificant number up there, right? The number of oocytes that result in an embryo with 1 PN. And while ICSI is great and it reduces triploidy, it cannot eliminate it. And so without the SNP analysis, haploid and triploid embryos, they could appear euploid. This is a slide, so just to kind of make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So diploid, right, is what we want. This is for chromosomes 1, 2, and 3. So on the left-hand side is haploid, where each of these chromosomes just have 1 copy. The middle is diploid, and then triploid's on the right-hand side, where there's 3 copies of them all. So Jangus had mentioned earlier that we have had some interest and been working with 0 PN and 1 PN embryos. And so in one of our talks, we took a participant survey. We asked, what do you do with these embryos? They're continuing to develop. You get to the biopsy stage. You have to make a decision as a clinic, right? And we were surprised that I'm going to really kind of highlight and draw your attention to the discard embryo section. So about a third of clinics stated that they were discarding these embryos that were noted to be 0 PN and 1 PN. Another third are performing PGTA. It was unclear if they were also doing a ploidy analysis. And then those other could be some sort of ploidy analysis or just going to transfer or just kind of, not answering. But I think for me, as somebody who talks to patients all day, it's really important. We hear these patients that they have 1 embryo, and to be able to potentially think about a 0 PN or 1 PN embryo that could maybe be a candidate for transfer as opposed to a candidate for discard feels like a really big deal. So when we look at some outcome data, we worked with partner clinics just to kind of follow this up a little bit and look at the aneuploidy rate amongst 0 PN and 1 PN embryos. So you can see here the euploid embryos. So clinic let us know on the biopsy they were 0 PN and 1 PN. We went ahead and did PGTA. Euploid was just over 63%, and then mosaic and aneuploid is that other percentage there that you guys can see. So what we did then is we took those euploids, and you guys saw Jangus explain beautifully the STR analysis. So, right, we wanted to determine ploidy, and it was really impressive, at least for me, when I get to sort of think about these numbers and what it means to patients, is that of the 0 PN, so that's an N of 179, over 96% of those were 2 PN. So that's a huge percentage. You can see there's, about 2% that turned out to be 1 PN or 3 PN, but the majority of those embryos were really, in essence, 2 PN. They've made it all the way to the biopsy stage. They've been biopsied and sent to us. You can also see for the 1 PN, which is on the right-hand side there, so that's an N of 95, that it's still the majority there that, bless you, it's still the majority there that are 2 PN. So almost 57% of those that were noted as 1 PN are in essence turning out to be 2 PN. You do have a significant portion that are 1 PN, but I would challenge those who are looking at this slide, right? This is a significant number of embryos to patients, and this may mean a significant number of transfers if we're able to address this. Switching gears just a little bit, wanted to talk about contamination. This is a very dramatic slide, so for cumulus cell contamination. But as you guys know, right, cumulus cells, those maternal somatic cells, and if they end up as part of the biopsy, so part of the trophectoderm biopsy, they're maternal DNA. we would expect them to be 46XX. And so if they become part of that biopsy, they can be reflected in that result, and that could be a false euploid or a false mosaic result just on the basis of that DNA getting somewhere that it's not meant to be. And so being able to detect cumulus cell contamination is a really big deal, and that's something I'm pretty excited about. As a genetic counselor, it was exciting that there was a committee opinion that came out this year in July. So ASRM put out this committee opinion, and I think I'm going to say that those that I get to talk to know that genetic counselors function in all of these ways, but I will always take the moment to sort of plug for genetic counselors. So for us, we get to serve as the patient's key contact during test development, during results reporting, to answer any of those questions. We thoroughly review cases, and the GCs get to confirm and explain feasibility of PGT, what samples we need, why we're doing the testing we're doing, and really we're best positioned to handle the technical aspects of the PGT process and provide pre-test and post-test counseling. So I would encourage you guys, if you don't already, get to know your lab and your GCs, please do so. We're always happy to talk to you. I do also want to just touch briefly on the PGTM portion, because for patients, there are some interesting things that this new platform does allow us to do. There's some of this for you guys who've been doing PGTM that will look familiar, right? There's a patient care team, GCs and lab. There's a process to get them in the system. For us, we have an embryo testing approach where we do a stepwise approach. So we're doing PGTA and then do PGTM when the patient has reached the number of transferable embryos they would like us to test within a 6-month period. So there's a little bit of flexibility that we can get with this approach and this platform, which has been really helpful for our patients. One of the things that's most exciting for us to talk about is the option of quick prep cases or disorders. So we've listed, I forgot there's animation, hold on. So for quick prep cases, these are, if we have family members, if we have those people tested that we need to have and their DNA samples available, these cases can be really ready in 1 to 2 weeks. This allows a patient to cycle faster. For those of you who have patients who are, 41, the difference of a few months makes a huge difference for that patient. And so these are the cases that we're doing right now as far as quick prep. One of the really exciting things, though, is that we can add disorders to the quick prep list. So we've had people approach us and say, what about PKD? What about GJB2? And in fact, those are kind of on the list that we're really just we're just expanding this list as we go because it's been so helpful to patients, and the technology really allows us to do that. So that's been great. If there's a test or a condition that's not on this list, the rarer cases, if you will, those are taking more like a 6 to 8 week prep. So still feasible, just not quite as fast. General rules still apply. So, we need family members, we need biological samples, we need to know patients' test results and things of that nature. So none of that has really changed. From a PGTM standpoint, I'm then going to go ahead and just hop into difficult cases, which are sometimes PGTM cases. But with this new technology, because there's additional coverage, oftentimes by getting more data points, you have the ability to do more difficult cases. These are cases that previously may have been declined or not an option. And so we always encourage, we're available to review any difficult cases because changing platforms and newer technology does allow more patients to get access to care, which is a really important thing. We can do things like family member cases, and again, we review everything on a case-by-case basis, so it's a really personalized approach. But as Cengiz had mentioned as well, if you've previously done PGTA testing and now you have a request for PGTM testing sort of down the line, that's something that used to throw us, and I've been doing this for a decade, and it used to throw us, and it doesn't anymore, which is really nice. And a lot of that's due to the amplification process and the way that we get to handle these samples. My last thing is just going to be to address a little bit the psychological burden of PGT. You guys know these patients are going through everything. It's a physical, emotional, financial process. And so many, not just women, but couples, right, are experiencing anxiety, depression. Genetic testing sometimes feels like it adds a stressor or burden because we're asking them to make additional decisions, but I would also point out the contrast of that, where genetic testing actually can provide some additional control and autonomy options back to your patients. So I think a little bit is how we look at it, right? Whether it's asking them to make more decisions or actually giving them more options and more control back in the process. And so really with that, things like being able to look at the cohort of embryos and confirming they're all related, everything that we can do, I think, in that aspect is good psychologically to help our patients.